So in Photoshop, the transform functions that you just looked at are pretty universal when you're applying them to something. The exception to that rule is editable type. So here I have a type layer, and when I hit Command T to bring up my transform functions and right click, some of these options are not available for editable type. So I can scale it, make it bigger, smaller, I can rotate it, I can skew it, which is when you make it become as if it's maybe an italic where it's bent over a little bit. But I can't do any of the really cool stuff to it. If I right click and choose warp, I can do the preset ones, but I can't use that custom cool warp feature. You can do things like arch, which is quite useful. You can do things like wave, which is also a setting that we use quite a bit. You can affect the setting by changing the numbers up in the control. So just cranking that up a little bit more. And if I hit enter, it will sometimes remember these settings when I go back to it. So if I hit Command T again and right click and choose warp, it'll remember what that last setting was. But I can't do the really cool stuff like making it wrap around a round object or fit to a perspective. So I'm going to undo, go back in my history by hitting Command Option Z a few times to where this is a straight object. I'm going to turn off the layer that is hiding my background. So here I have a billboard picture, and this is a great example of when you might need to apply type to a surface that has been photographed, so it's got some real perspective and 3D-ness to it, and you want that type to match up. So here's our transform layer. I'm going to make this type as big as it can go on my image. And just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to change the color of it too. Okay, here's how we get around that pesky little problem of the warp features not being available. Well, the first and most obvious thing is to rasterize the layer, which makes it no longer editable type. You do that by right-clicking and choosing rasterize. However, in my experience, it's always good to keep your type editable so you can go back and change it. The workaround for this is to change this type layer into a smart object. So you do that by right-clicking on the layer and choosing Convert to Smart Object. Now you'll notice the thumbnail of your layer has changed. It has a little icon in the bottom of it. That means that this is a smart object and has actually become a secondary Photoshop file that's nested within this one. If I do my transforms now on this smart object, it will allow me to do all the warp, but it won't allow me to type or change the type from here. So let's do the transform to get it put on that sign, and then I'll show you how you can still change the type. So I'm on this layer, I'm going to hit Command T, and when I'm trying to fit type or an image to something that is in perspective, honestly the easiest thing to do is hold down Command and just move the corners of that object to fit the edges of whatever it is that you're trying to fit it to. If I were taking my time to do this, I would probably find a tall, skinny type so I wasn't distorting this one as much as I am. But holding Command will let you change those corners individually. If you let go of Command, you can move the edges in or out, and then hit Enter when you're done. At this point, if I hit Command T, it will always remember those same transform controls and put them right on the edges of those corners. If this were a regular layer, it wouldn't have done that. It would have started a whole new transform rectangle around the whole thing. So that's nifty. But what if I want to change this word from transform to something else? I can't edit the type from here. The way to edit a smart object is to double click on the thumbnail of that smart object. You'll get this window. I'm just going to click through it for now. And it will open that layer as its own little Photoshop document. This is its own little Photoshop document in many different senses. I can change the word here, it's still editable. I can size it down to fit my new word if I wanted. Probably want to keep everything inside of this window because outside of it it'll look like it just crops. I could do things with this type to further edit it. So I'm going to select the negative space around this type just as an example. I'm holding shift to grab all of the little areas that are negative on these, and then select inverse, new layer, fill in that layer with some color, option delete to fill it, and then I'm going to move it below the other one. Looks like I forgot a little spot, so I'm going to click on my hello there so I can use it to select that bit, and then on my color layer and delete it. I can do things here like add effects, editing. This becomes literally its whole other document. However, if I look up at the top, you'll notice that this one that I'm in has the name of my original layer, but then it says .psb as in boy. That is a sign that you are in a smart object layer. It's a temporary large file inside of another one. To make it so that this change shows up on our original document, I need to be in this window, I need to save it, so File, Save, and then I need to close the window, which is what that little warning box that popped up when we first did this said. So I'm going to close the window, and now it updates to my object that is already transformed and placed on this surface. In fact, because it looks really weird, I'm going to even add a background layer with a color. Nothing like a good old circusy color blend. So now I've saved it, Command S, and I'm closing the window, Command W, and there it is. Things like warp, you can warp, so Command T, right click, choose warp, and then the adjustments you make will be remembered. So when you hit Command T again and choose warp, there's those controls. You can return it to its original state without it becoming pixelated because it's actually seeing the original object, which is every bit as large. So this would be the exception where if I wanted to transform something really small and then transform it back to the original size, it's not going to lose any image quality because I have the original file is still there within this smart object. The last little thing I'm going to show you is if I shrink this down and hold down Option Command to make more copies, and then double click on one of these, I'm going to tell this thing not to show again and click OK, and change something about this. So I'm going to change the background color and save it and then close it. It will update all of my copies. So the next step in this lesson, you'll really see where that comes in handy. So this is just a hello. It's there. Now you know how to use a smart object and save it so it will update on your original document.